Alright, so it is oil change time for the bobber. So I figured while I was changing the oil and got the oil out of it, I'll take the side cover off and do some the modifications to the starter mechanism and just see if we can get this one to start better, because it starts up pretty good, but then like once you get it hot, like you go running around town or doing whatever, go for a ride, and it gets hot, then it doesn't want to start as good. So normally it'll crank, but then it jumps out. You can hear that starter almost kicking out right at the last of it. So after it's hot, then we start running into props. So I'm going to take this off, and we're going to do what we did for improving the starter in the other video, and then actually see what it does for the bobber, because it worked really well for the motor that I'm using to build for my next bike. All right, so let's get started here by draining the oil out for our oil change. So while we got the oil coming out, let's go ahead and start taking the stuff off. Let me go get some wrenches. All right, so we're going to start with the side cover. We got to have that off. Take the shifter mechanism off. We're going to see if we can get a lot of oil out of it before we stand it up on its center stand. That way we don't have oil leaking everywhere. Pop our cable loose. Yeah, we got to take the electrical off. It looks like we're about done with oil dripping, so let's go ahead and put our drain plug back in. There we go. So now we can get our oil pan out of the way. So now what we need to do is put it up on the stand. So hopefully that remaining oil is going to go to the other side and it won't drip out. There we go. Now, hopefully any extra oil will go to the back. Now we'll get us a doggy pee pad to catch any oil that's going to drip out. Alright, so now we just got to do the disconnect the electrical. Alright, so there's our wires. So now all we need to do is remove the case. So now all we got to do is just loosen up the case. Sometimes they come up and just pop them. Just grab it right there. Put a bolt right there where that cover goes. Sometimes you give you enough, you can just pop it free. Got a little bit of oil dripping out. Starter mechanism. Pin and starter and all. So everything's fell out. But we know how to put all that back in, so no big deal. So now we got our cover off, and all of our starter mechanism went with it. So this one still got the big spring right here. Everything looks good there. And there's the gear. That gear still looks good. And there's the backup disc that goes behind the gear. All that looks good. And here is our starter gear. Actually, doesn't look too worn. So maybe it'll be all right. Put that joker back in there. All right, so now all we got to do is clean up a little bit. Looks like my gasket down here didn't survive, so I got to put a new gasket on. So we got to take all this off, get us a new gasket on there. We'll get all that cleaned up, and then we can put our new gasket on after we do a little bit of machining here. Okay, so down here, right here is that surface that I'm going to machine off, and see if we can't make that better. If I look in here, I'm pretty sure I hadn't had this in the part because there's an extra shim in here. I don't really know what that's going to. So this is an add-on to the bike there. Not really sure why that shim is in there. Not a stock part, because this is an 82, and so it didn't have anything different than the 81s. So we're going to put it all back together and see after we shorten our spring up, and we're going to make a little clip for that right there. Get the spring shortened, make that little clip tighter, because this one, let's see, it's really loose, so we got to tighten that up a little bit, make sure that gear is in there right, and see what we can do. So yeah, so this one, this little shim right here, I don't know what that's from. He's an extra. I don't know if somebody had that thing on there or what. Probably shimming it right there to push that gear over a little bit. Well, all right, so we'll get set up over here and see what we can do to punch that down, machine that surface off, and shorten the spring up, add the clip, and put her all back together. So we'll get set up here and be back in just a minute. All right, so the first stop is to machine the cover out. So before I do that, I have got to knock this little bushing back down in there a little bit so I can machine that cover off for my shims. So we'll start by taking a socket that's the same as the outer diameter, and we're going to give it a few whacks. All right, so we got that knocked down. So now we can set it up on the mill up here. So if you were following along on the last videos where I was testing this on my other motor, you can see that I used a router. But since then I have upgraded to a mill, and so now we can do it the easy way using a mill. What we want to do is, I bought an extra, one of these shims right here, and so it's the one with the rubber in it. So this is the one that was on the bike. I'm going to heat that up and take the rubber out of that, measure the thickness of both of those, and put that on the outside to push everything down this way. So I got to take off here the equivalent of those two pieces of metal shim right there. So I'm going to take a torch, heat those up, and we'll be back here in just a second, and then I'll show you the thickness. All right, so basically all I did was heat up that washer that has the rubber in between it, and took the rubber out, and so now we don't need that little piece, because what we're going to do is machine down that thickness here and push everything that way. So let me measure this up. So these two guys combined together are millimeter, so just above 2 millimeter, which is 0.0825. So that's what we got to take off that surface right there. So when we add all of that, and we have the gear on it, like that, it's sit somewhere right around there. What it's going to do is allow this to engage further because we took some of the surface away. So that, combined with shortening this spring up a little bit, is going to allow us to get a little bit better gear engagement. All right, so let's get all this back off here. And what we want to do actually before we do that is we want to get a marker and mark how far we have to go. As we can see, we got to be out right there, about there. And that surface has to go all the way down. And then over here, right there. All right, so we got it marked on the diameter that we got to achieve. So now we take all this back off and machine this out. All right, so we got our paper all in there, so we don't have excess shavings going everywhere. We'll blow all that off. Now all we got to do is take all of our cloth out. Put it back up that way. I'll blow anything that might have got down in there out. All right, so now we got that surface machined down about 2 millimeters. So that's the thickness of these two right here. So these are going to go up here on this side of the whole unit, and it's going to push everything down. So if we put our assembly together, you can see it goes like this, and then all of that goes in there together, and then the gear is up on top, and then this is going to go on this side. And what it's going to do is push everything over a little bit and make all of that go further that way. So next on the list, we have to cut our spring a little bit right here. We'll cut a loop out of that spring to get it to where when it comes together like this, that it's not fully compressing the spring. We want to give it enough to hit the bumper in the back. We need to take just a curl off of that spring, and then we'll be in good shape. So let's get set up, do that, and that'll be the next item off our list. All right, so the spring one's pretty easy. All we got to do is just take a curl off of it. So I'm just going to grab it, and I'm going to take a grinder and grind one curl off and then square that end back up. So all we got to do is just hit it with a grinder, and it'll cut it in half pretty quick. Put a little mark on it. We'll just grab it and bend it. The grinding weakens it. You don't have to cut all the way through it. All right, so we got one curl off. Now we just need to make the end where it's not so pointy. And there we go. One curl later. Now it's kind of at an odd angle, so what we want to do is bend this in a little bit to get it so that it's flat right at the end, because you don't want it to be angled up this way. You want it to be flat so it's squished. So that one's super simple. Just a matter of taking one coil off. So the coil used to be there, and now it's here. So that gives us plenty of room. We still got a little bit of spring action to help it throw out. And what I'm going to do is put that on the inside. So we'll see how that goes together. All right, so next on the list is to make the little clip clamp to clip the Bendix gear spring in a little bit harder. So we'll set up and get that done. All right, so we are all indicated in with our clip material. So now we just got to cut a clip. So let's come in here with our part tool, square everything up, and let's see if we can part this little dude. And there we go. We got our little part. So now all we got to do is clean that little fella up, and we'll be ready to compress it and make our clip. So we'll be back in just a minute with a compressed clip. All right, so we got everything done. We got our machining done. To drop that down a little further, we got our spring shortened, and now we got our clip put on there. So all that looks really good, and we're ready to take her back over there and do some reassembly. All right, so now we got everything machined and shortened and clipped and the whole 9 yards. So let's do our reassembly. So we're going to start with our little shims that's going to push everything over. So what we want to do is get them on the shaft, and we got to add the original one back. So I'll just put them together like this, make kind of a shim sandwich. So that goes back in here, and those 2 extra ones push everything back a little bit. So then we just need to orient our gear properly. So now it's going to have to fit one way or the other. So let me get the gear in there. Make sure I got my shims. And we'll orient it this way. And put our gear back in with the shims. And then that lines it up so that it's level right there with the starter gear. If it goes the other way, it's too tight to the backside. It pushes out. So now we just need to get our starter mechanism in there. So let's put him on with our spring and our clip and everything. Sometimes you just slide it right in there. And we put our clip down in the groove. Line up on the threads. Sometimes a bit of a pain. Alright, so we got the gear on now. It's good to get it to link into the other one. There we go. So our little clip is clearing the wall there. We're in good shape, and it's clearing the gear. We could scoot that back and forth if we needed to. All right, so all of that's back in there with our extra shims and everything. So now all we got to do is put our case back on. I'm leaving this out. This was something somebody added. We're not going to put that back in there because we don't need it now. All right, so let's get our electrical hook back up here. There we go. So now we got our wiring back up. And there we go. We have successfully modified our starting system. So hopefully we get us some oil in here. We'll fire it up and see if it sounds any better. All right, so we're waiting on our oil to come back from the store. And so while we are waiting on that, let's have a look-see at our new engagement on our gears since we did all of our little modifications. Right down in there you can see the engagement of the bending. So it was right about there based on the marks that are on the gear. So I got the plugs out because I don't have any oil in it yet. So let me turn it on and just bump the starter. So now when I bump the starter, it ought to engage quite a bit further. Yeah. So you can see now those two gears are coming in solid. So now I'll just crank it. Since I don't have plugs in it, it'll just crank around and we'll see what it does for engagement or not. Yeah, so now it's jumping. So let's get a slow-mo of that and see if it's engaging or disengaging. Alright, so here we go after our started mod. Just see how everything works. Fire. Didn't have much clank at all. Sounded a whole lot better when it hit that time. We'll bump it again. One time for good measure. See, now it's not disengaging. So even on that third try with quite a few cranks, because it flooded, it still didn't kick out. So I think we got ourselves a better starting bobber now. Well, alrighty. Well, thanks for watching.